Hey everyone! In today's video, I'm sharing 30 spring DIYs using mostly Dollar Tree supplies. This is a compilation of some of my favorite spring projects I've made in the past to give you tons of inspiration. Okay, so let's jump right in. For the first DIY, I'll be using 3 of these thick rectangular wood blocks from Dollar Tree to make an adorable little wooden book stack for spring. I really love how thick and sturdy these blocks are. I'll be stacking them on top of each other, and here I'm just making sure I have the side of the blocks that I like, and so I'm just checking out all the sides to see which one looks best. I'm going to be painting the blocks different colors, so I picked some light pastel shades that give off those spring vibes. For the first block, I'll be painting this really pretty lilac paint from Folk Art. This is actually a paint and sealer in one, which is perfect because this is going to be on the top of the stack and it will just give it that extra protection. I'm using a sponge brush and it just goes on so beautifully. I'm going to be painting the top surface and the sides, leaving the bottom unpainted since I'll be applying glue there. I did about 2 coats for a nice even coverage. Once that's done, I set it aside to dry because in a bit, I'll be applying a decorative stencil to give it some pretty detail. For the second block, I'll be painting it white using Waverly's white chalk paint. Since this block is going to be in the center of the stack, I'm just focusing on painting the sides, so this one was super quick to do. I'll be Mod Podging a decorative napkin over it, but before I get to that, I'm going to paint the final bottom block in moss green from Waverly. This shade is so beautiful. It's a rich, earthy, rustic green. It's so pretty. And since this is going to be the bottom block, I figured I'd go ahead and paint the bottom side too, just to finish it off nicely. I'm not planning to add any wording, so now I have the option to flip it over and make it the top. Now that the paint has completely dried, I'm ready to add some fun details to them. For the lilac block, I'll be adding an antique looking metallic sticker on the side. It has some really nice detailing and I get these at Dollar Tree. I use them often and I happen to have one that was narrow enough to fit perfectly on the side. I just stick it on, but for extra security, you can always add a little glue underneath. I'm painting right over it with the same lilac paint, but honestly, this wasn't really part of my original plan. Otherwise, I would have attached the sticker first and then painted the whole block. But you know, you can always leave it unpainted, or you could also paint it white before attaching the sticker. I think that contrast would have looked really nice too. On the top of the block, I'll be adding some stenciling. This is a 3-pack stencil set from Walmart, and I'll be using the leaf design. I'm using white chalk paint for this, and so I taped the stencil down securely. I dip my brush in the paint and remove any excess on a paper towel, and then I stipple lightly over the stencil, applying the paint in thin layers to avoid any bleeding underneath. It's important to build up the color gradually, adding just a little paint at a time. Now, I'm not going for a solid heavy look with the stencil. I want the design to feel softer and more subtle, so I'm applying the paint lightly in some areas for a more delicate finish. So far, I'm so happy with how this one's looking. I love all the details. For the green block, I'm using another stencil from a Walmart pack. I'm going with a white chalk paint again for this one. Walmart does have some really nice stencils at a great price, and I love how this turned out too. It has that vintage old storybook vibe. For the middle one, I'm going to Mod Podge this pretty floral napkin on it. I got it at Michael's, and I just love the soft pastel colors. I think it'll complement the other 2 blocks perfectly. So the first step is to carefully separate the layers of the napkin. I only need the top layer since that's where the design is. Once I have that, I'm cutting out the part of the napkin I want to use. Next, I'm applying a generous amount of Mod Podge to the narrow side of the wood where I want the napkin to go. I'm also spreading a bit onto the edge of the wider side to help the napkin tuck in smoothly and create a cleaner finish once it's applied. Now I'll be using the iron-on method to attach the napkin. So once the Mod Podge is completely dry, I place the napkin on top of the wood where I've applied the glue. To protect the napkin, I'm placing a piece of parchment paper over that. The heat reactivates the glue and that helps to bond the napkin to the wood. Then I'm just carefully running my mini heat press, you can also use an iron, over the parchment paper. And in the end, you get a really smooth, seamless finish with no wrinkles or bubbles. And after that, I just sand off the overhang. And finally, I glue everything together. I'm using wood glue for a strong, secure hold with a bit of hot glue here and there just to give it that quick grip while it sets. So I just stack the wood blocks on top of each other, making sure they're lined up just right. You can leave it as is. You can also embellish with some ribbon or jute string. I love how this turned out. Each block is so unique, and I think that's what makes it even better. I love that they all don't match perfectly, and it gives it such a charming, eclectic feel. For the next DIY, I'll be using burlap canvases from Dollar Tree, and I'll be using 4 for this project. The first step is to remove the burlap, which I'll be using later. I just want to reposition it, so I need to pull out the staples. Now, to be honest, I didn't realize there were going to be this many staples. This was definitely the longest part of this project and my least favorite. Also, there were some staples holding together the front corners, which I did remove, and I also reinforced any shaky joints with some wood glue. I'll be gluing these 4 wooden frames together to look like a window pane, just like so. This is Super Glue's wood glue, which I got at Dollar Tree. I want the front to be even and flush, so I do make sure the back is what's facing up. I clamp the frame together and I just continue applying the glue and clamping to ensure a tight bond. Once it's dried, I turn it over and I give it a light sanding. For any areas where there are visible holes or gaps, I just smooth on some spackle over that to cover and smooth it out. I let it dry a bit and then I sand those areas again just to smooth things out even more. I'm going to dry brush on some white chalk paint. This one's from Folk Art and I'm just using a chalk paintbrush and I lightly go over the frame. I really don't want it to go on too opaque. I do want it to look a bit distressed and weathered with some of the wood underneath peeking through. Next, I will be gluing the burlap back on, and so I trim one down to fit a frame. And then I glue it down on the back. I apply a strip of glue on one side of the frame, and then I attach the burlap to that. And as I'm gluing, I make sure that it's glued nice and tight, gently pulling the fabric, especially after I get 2 sides down. I did switch to a roller cutter, which cuts smoothly and much more quickly. And then just continue gluing down the rest of the burlap, applying hot glue on the frame, one side at a time, making sure to gently pull it back so that it goes on nice and tight. I really love how this is looking already. Now to finish it off, I place a little hook in the center. You can also use command hooks if you want to remove it later and change things up. And then just attach a little tin bucket to that. You can place some flowers or greenery inside or attach a little wreath on the hook instead. And we are done! I really love how this one turned out. For the next project, I'm going to be making a very quick and simple wreath, and I'll be using this grapevine wreath. I get these at Michael's. They're really not too pricey, and I believe this is the 18-inch one. For flowers, I headed to Dollar Tree as well as Walmart, and I chose more muted down colors for the wreath. I'm starting out with these 2 greenery bouquets. I really like the shade of green on these, and these are from Walmart. I'm going to slightly bend them to go with the curve of the wreath, and I'm going to position them opposite each other. I'm just tucking it in. I'm not using hot glue only because I'm always reusing the wreath for other projects, and the grapevine wreath is so tightly dense, so it holds pretty well. Next up are these lavender bunch from Dollar Tree. These are so pretty, and I position them right on top of the greenery, tucking them into the wreath. I do make sure to leave a little space in the center. I'll be placing 3 flowers in the center, 2 ivory and 1 peach. These are also from Dollar Tree, and these I do secure with a little hot glue. Next up, I'll be using this Dollar Tree rectangle wood slice, as well as these poster stickers from Dollar Tree as well. I'll be spelling out the word hello, but before I peel and stick them, I'm going to distress it a bit. And all I'm doing is just getting a little sanding sheet and lightly going over the letters. That will scratch it up, letting that white underneath show through. And then you just want to lightly wipe it down to remove any black dust. I started out with the middle letter L, and I placed that right in the center, and then I just worked my way out, peeling the letters out and then sticking them on the wood. The stickiness in the back isn't really strong, so you're going to need to seal it in place once you're done placing the letters. Next, I'm going to secure it right in the center of the wreath. I do remove that jute string hanger, but you can leave that on and find a place to hook it on the wreath directly as well. I just rest it on the wreath and then I put a little hot glue to hold it in place. And this simple wreath DIY is done, and I love the way it turned out. I always love making little wooden trays or crates, so for this spring-themed DIY, I grabbed a couple of these little wooden bunnies from Dollar Tree. This plank, which I trimmed down to 9 inches, it was originally 12 inches, and 6 bamboo sticks, which I purchased on Amazon. I add some glue on the ends of the plank, and then I adhere the wooden bunnies on each end like so. For extra support and strength, I glue a tumbling block on each corner. I'm going to glue 3 bamboo sticks on each side, going along with the curve of the bunny. So I measure and mark them and trim them with my miter shears. Then I glue them on the sides, spacing them out evenly. To make sure there's enough space to place some candles or little pots or vases, I make sure not to glue the bamboo sticks too close to the bottom or the top. I glue them on both sides, and look how adorable this looks. This actually looks really beautiful with just the raw bare wood. You can definitely just seal it with some protective finish and you're all done. But I wanted to add some stain to it to give it a rustic finish. I'm using Early American from Varathane. If you are going to be staining, make sure to give it a little sanding, especially around the sides, because that area is a little rough and it's going to soak up a lot of stain. You can also paint the bamboo a different color, or add some stenciling on the bunny, or even Mod Podge some beautiful spring napkins onto them. But in the end, I really love how this turned out. Dollar Tree sells these really nice wooden slices in different sizes and shapes, and for this project, I'll be using a couple of their rectangular one. Now, I did make sure that they were similar in size because we'll be making a cute little planter box with them. I'll also be using a couple of these square mini wooden pallets, also from Dollar Tree. First, I need to remove the jute hanger and the staples. The staples are pretty secure, so I'm using my pliers to pull out the string and a staple remover to pull the staples out. It's really attached in there, so if you don't want to deal with it, you can always just leave the staples in place. I'm going to apply some antique wax over the wooden slices to give them a nice warm look. I'm using a damp cloth to apply the wax. I want the wax to go on very lightly, so using a damp cloth helps to spread it out without making it too dark or overpowering. Now you can leave it as is for a natural rustic finish, or if you prefer, you can also paint it for a completely different look. Now for the mini wooden square palettes, I'm going to use this beautiful celery green chalk paint from Waverly. It's a soft, fresh color that adds a pop of brightness without being too overpowering. I love how chalk paint gives a smooth, matte finish, and it looks really pretty on these little wooden pieces. Now there are some hard to reach areas inside the palettes, and so I had to use a smaller brush to really get into those spots. Once everything is dried, I'm going to glue them together. So I'm just applying some wood glue on the sides of the palettes, and I'm applying it on both of them. And then I stand up one of the slices and attach the palettes on the edges. And then I attach the remaining wooden slice to form a rectangle. To make the base, I'll be using a couple small square dowels and 3 giant craft sticks. So to match, I'm applying some of that antique wax on the craft sticks. And then I'm painting the square dowels with that same celery chalk paint. Okay, once that's dry, I'm applying some wood glue on the inside bottom of the square palettes, and then I'm just attaching the dowel to that, and I'm making sure that the bottom is flush. Then I just do the same thing on the opposite side, applying glue on the palette where the dowel is going to be attached. So these dowels are what's going to hold up the craft stick base. After that, I just apply some glue on the dowels or the ends of the craft sticks, and I place that down to create the base. And I'm using 3 craft sticks, spreading them out equally. Now I was going to end here, it's so perfect just like that, but then I thought it would look really beautiful with some decorative stenciling, at least on one side. It was such a nice blank canvas. And so I got this stencil 3-pack from Walmart. This was just under $3. The stencils are beautiful and the birds on the branches are so charming. I wanted to add one of those designs. I'll be using black chalk paint, but you can also add some different colors there. Maybe black and white for the feathers on the bird, a dark brown on the branches, and some green on the leaves. So that's another option. So I'm applying the black chalk paint over the stencil, making sure to dab out as much excess paint as I can. I'm gently tapping it over the stencil, working it in light layers to get a smooth, even coverage. This way I avoid any smudging and keep the design edges nice and crisp. Once I'm done with that, I carefully remove the stencil before it dries completely, and this one is all done. It's such a simple yet beautiful project, and I love how it turned out. You can add some flowers, succulents, or candles, or even use it as a little organizer for your favorite things. I wanted to add a little decorative touch to this book by covering it with one of the peel and stick wallpapers. And I really wanted to cover it with that same one from the prior DIY, the pink flowers and the bluebirds. So the next day I headed to my local Dollar Tree to pick up another one, but unfortunately they were all out, so instead I got my next favorite design. First, I lay the wallpaper face down and I place a book right on top. And then I fold the wallpaper over the book, making sure the ends are even so that the center of the wallpaper is over the spine of the book. And this is also a good way to make sure your book will be fully covered. Then I fold the excess inside the edge of the book cover. I turn the book over and I do the same thing on the other side, tucking that excess paper inside the book cover. Before I start adhering the wallpaper, I'm going to cut out the corners like so. And this will make it look neater and easier to work with. I'm also cutting 2 slits on the paper along the spine of the book. So to stick the paper on the book, I'm going to start on one end, peeling out that white backing paper and sticking it over the top cover. And I just keep pulling out that backing paper until one side is completely covered. And then I flip the book over and cover the other side, slowly peeling out the backing paper. It does help to crease it down. Just slowly peel it out while smoothing the paper down. And then I just fold in the top and bottom flaps. But before I fold in the side flaps, I cut the corners at an angle, and this will give it a nice clean finish. And then I fold that side flap down and tuck it inside the cover. I repeat this on the other side, cutting the corners at an angle. For the spine, I trim the excess wallpaper so there's just enough to cover it, and then I fold it down. And that finishes it off nicely. Well, I definitely prefer using a peel and stick over regular paper because it really looks like it's part of the book's original design. I'll be using this raffia grass skirt from Dollar Tree. Now this is just raffia, so if you already have some raffia on hand, then you can definitely just go with that. The raffia is attached to a jute string. There's a little knot on the end of it, so I just snip that off and then I slide out the raffia. There's a little kind of a knot in the center of each strand, so to remove it, I just gently pull each end. I'll be braiding this with 3 on each strand to add some thickness to the braid, but you can definitely do more. While I'm braiding, I'll be continuing to glue the raffia at the end to create a long braided rope. So to braid, I tape down at the top 3 strands of 3 and I do a very loose braid. I do start out with a tighter braid at first, as you can see, but I thought it was just a bit too thin, so I did loosen it up a bit. Then when I ran out of raffia, I instead just glued the strands individually with a school glue, and that just blended together nicely. So So I just keep continuing to braid the raffia. I did end up using most of it, but I do leave 12 of them aside, which I'll be using to make the handles of the tray. For the base of the tray, I'll be using this wood round from Dollar Tree. I'll be gluing the braided raffia on top, so first I need to mark the center, and that will be my starting point. I just put some hot glue in the center of the wood round, and I place the end of the braided raffia on top, and then I just wind the raffia rope going in a circle. I also make sure to add hot glue underneath the raffia as I'm going. Now as I'm winding it around and looking at it, I think it would have also looked really nice if I added more per strand, maybe 6 to 8 for a thicker and tighter braid. But with that said, I am loving how this is looking so far. Now I don't want to glue this all the way to the edge just yet. I do make sure to leave about an inch or so of the wood exposed. As far as the 12 strands I set aside, I go ahead and braid them with 4 strands on each, making it a bit tighter than before, and this will make the handles. I glue one end of that on the wood, and then I determine how long I want the handles to be, and then I glue the other side of the handles down. And then I glue the other handle on the opposite side, making sure it's cut to the same size. Once the handles are on, I just continue gluing down the braided rope until it reaches the end. Now I want the tray to have sides, so I take the extra raffia and I wrap it around the edge, stacking layers on top of each other as I go. I'm able to go about 4 times around, and I just keep an eye on where I started winding it on top, and I make sure that the end doesn't go beyond that area so that the sides are even. And finally, I want the handles to be standing upright and not laying flat, and so I just hot glue them onto the sides. And there you have it. You can place a little faux plant or greenery or a cute candle arrangement. I love how this turned out. I love crafting with Dollar Tree's bamboo cutting boards. They're made of real bamboo and have such a nice smooth finish, which makes them perfect for all kinds of DIY decor. So when I saw that my store finally had the new larger size in stock, I was so excited, and of course I grabbed a bunch. For the first DIY, I'll be using one bamboo cutting board, and I just love that there's more room to work with. I'll also be using one of these mini wood pallets from Dollar Tree. Now I got this vintage floral rub-on transfer from Amazon, and the design is really pretty. It came with 3 different sheets, and honestly I love the print on all of them. I've actually never used this rub-on transfer before, so this is my first time trying it out, and I'm hoping all goes well. Right now I'm just trying to decide which one to cut out, and honestly that might be the hardest part. They're all so pretty and I kind of want to use them all. Now I'm going to apply the transfer above where I just placed a palette, so not the whole board, just that top section, and I'm keeping that in mind as I choose the design. I really like this section here with the bird and the flower, so I carefully cut that out. Next, I just flip the transfer over, peel off the white backing paper, and place it down right where I want it to go. Then I just use that little stick it came with to rub the design onto the board. I start by rubbing over the whole image first to help hold it in place. Then I carefully lift one corner and slowly peel it back. If a part doesn't transfer right away, I just lay it back down, and then I just keep rubbing over it until it does. Now there was a little spot that no matter how much I tried, I just could not get it to transfer. I don't know if it was the board or the transfer itself, but in the end it was fine, so it did blend. And so I'm just tapping along the edges, making sure it's fully down and everything stuck in place. Now you'll want to seal it, and you can use any water-based sealer like Mod Podge just to help protect the transfer and keep it from peeling over time. Next I'm going to paint the wood palette in the shade Seaside Blue from Deco Art, but really you can use any color you like. Just about anything will complement the wood beautifully. These Dollar Tree foam brushes aren't the sturdiest. They bend pretty easily when you apply pressure, so it can be a little tricky, but they do the job. So I'm painting the front of the palette, but then I remembered that I actually wanted to use the back as the front, and so I flipped it over and painted that side as well. I just like how this side looked better with the 2 vertical wood pieces. It adds a nice detail. I'm also going to be elevating it slightly with some tower blocks underneath, so having a flat surface on the back will just make it easier to glue. To lift up the palette, I'm using 6 tower blocks and I'm gluing them together end to end in pairs, so I'll have 3 sets total. You could also use square dowels or any small wood pieces you have on hand, just something to give it a little height. And I'm just brushing on some of that blue paint. Now I will be adding glue on the narrower sides of the blocks, so those sides I want to keep unpainted. I also lightly sanded the part of the palette where I painted and I plan to add glue to. You know, it's always better to glue directly onto bare wood for a stronger hold. And then I'm just gluing the blocks on the palette like a U. And I'm gluing the vertical ones behind the ones in front to conceal it. I wanted to distress the palette a bit, just lightly, so I'm going in with my little finger sander and I'm sanding down the edges here and there. I'm also hitting a few spots on the surface just to rough it up a bit and give it more texture. Although I kind of wish I'd stain the palette a bit darker first, just so the distressing would stand out more, especially against this beautiful blue. I'm just adding some glue to the back of the palette. I really like using this glue from Type On. It holds really well. You can definitely use hot glue too, especially if you're not planning to put anything too heavy inside. To hang this up, I've just been loving these Command Velcro strips, and I love that they're removable. You're not left with holes on your wall. Now this stuff usually sticks to anything, but for whatever reason, it would just not hold well on this board, so just give the wood a good cleaning or even a quick sanding on that spot, or you can do what I did and add a strip of hot glue and that'll help stick it better. And we're all done. I really love that little pocket space where I can tuck in some greenery or faux flowers. It's such an easy way to add something pretty to the wall without taking up much space. I'm making a wooden basket with a handle for this project, and I'll be using this Dollar Tree frame. I wanted to remove the white board and I thought it would come right out, but it was really secured in place. Cutting out a small section will make it easier to loosen and wiggle that board free, but you will need something strong like a box cutter or a utility knife since the board is pretty sturdy. I'll be using a couple of these small wooden crates, and these are from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to glue them together side by side. Now I'm going to cover the shorter sides with a couple of giant craft sticks. I'll be using 2 for the front and 2 for the back. To measure, I simply hold the sticks up against the side of the box and mark the width. Then I trim the sticks down to fit. Once they're cut, I lightly sand the ends to smooth them out. For gluing, I flip the crates over so that the bottom is facing up. I want the craft sticks to be flushed with the top of the box. Then I apply glue to the sticks and press them into place. You could totally leave it like this. It looks great already, but I wanted to add a few embellishments to the wood. I'm going to use these puffy metallic stickers, which I got at Dollar Tree. I love using these for crafting. They add such a nice detail. Before I stick them onto the wood, I'm going to mix a couple of acrylic paint colors to get the shade that I want. But you know, feel free to use any color you like. Light greens or blues or deep colors would work great too. I'm going to place the stickers on the wood because I'm going to paint over it. If you want, you can add a little glue to the back of the stickers like Type Bond Quick and Thick glue, just to make sure they stay in place. Personally, I'm just going to stick them directly on, and I'm just trying to place the flower right in the center. I do also put one on the opposite side. After that, I brush over the paint, making sure to fully cover the metallic stickers. Now in order to fully cover the flower, you'll need a couple of coats. So once I get one coat down, I just use a heat tool to speed up the drying time, and then I apply another coat. Now another really pretty option is to paint the box first and then attach the flower on top if you want to preserve the vintage look of the stickers. So I paint all over the wooden boxes, including the inside, even though most of it will be covered later. Next, I'm just brushing some white paint all over the frame to give it a bit of a weathered look. I love that effect. And I also wanted to keep some of the frame peeking through underneath for some contrast. Once that's dry, I add some hot glue to the bottom of the frame like so. Then I place the crates on top. I just hold it in place until the glue sets. To keep it from wobbling, I'm gluing in some of these beads to the bottom. I'll be adding some flowers inside, so I grabbed a couple of Dollar Tree flower bouquets in pink and purple. I'm cutting some floral foam to fit inside the small crates. I thought I had it right, but I cut a little too short, so I had to trim a bit more to bring it closer to the height of the crates. And that will make it much easier to arrange the flowers. Okay, after that, I'm just trimming the flowers off the stems and arranging them in the basket, mixing the colors until I like the way it looks. I'm placing them all around but focusing more on one side. I'm also tucking in some greenery from Dollar Tree to fill in any empty spaces. You can just play around with the arrangement until you like the way it looks. You can keep it simple with some neutral greeneries or succulents, or even place some candles with a few flowers inside. Either way, you have a beautiful wooden basket to display it all in. So for this project, I'm going to be making a super cute spring wooden bead garland. I wanted to have different sizes and textures of wood to really make the garland pop. I'll be using the square bead garland from Dollar Tree along with some round beads. These are 2 different sizes, and I got these on Amazon. And I will also be using these round wood slices from Dollar Tree as well. I'm going to be drilling a hole right through the wood slices. Instead of holding them directly, I'm going to hold them with this clamp, and with a small drill bit, I'm using a 1/8 inch, I drill through the wood. You really don't want to go too thick with the drill bit, otherwise the wood may crack, and I'm going to drill through 5 of these. I will be using the string from the square garland, so I untie the ends and remove the beads. I'll be attaching a tassel on one end of the garland. I wrap some jute twine around my glue bottle, which is the size that I want. You can also just wrap it around your hand as well, and I wrap it about 20 times. I slide it out, and then on top I place a lace ribbon, which I'll trim down later. I cut out a piece of jute string, and I tie a couple knots on top. And then I flip the knot over so that the knot is hidden. Then I tie the end of the string from the garland around the top loop as well, leaving a couple inches of the shorter end. You can trim that out, but I'll be concealing it later. Then I cut the bottom loop like so. I take a small strip of the ribbon and I hot glue that around the top of the tassel about 1 inch from the top. And then I just trim the bottom of the tassel so that everything is even. I'm going to paint the wood slices with some green acrylic paint. This is grass green from Folk Art. I really don't want it to be too opaque, but more like a wash, so I dilute the paint with a little bit of water. On the other end, I'm going to be tying this wooden carrot from Dollar Tree. I'll be using this orange acrylic paint from Dollar Tree, and I mute it down with a little bit of light gray. As I'm brushing this on, I kind of didn't like how thin the wood was, so I decided to thicken it up by gluing another carrot to it. You can actually glue 3 together. I think that would have looked even better. Then I paint the top of the carrot green, a beautiful olive color. I give it a little sanding with a fine grit sanding sheet all over to dull down the paint and especially the edges. Once that is done, it's time to put everything together. I string through the beads, kind of alternating with the round and the square, and then spacing out the slices evenly. I tie the carrot on the end, concealing that extra string inside the beads, which you can also just snip off. And with that, our garland is complete. I'm really happy with how it turned out, especially with the different shapes. I love it. Next DIY, I'm going to be using this black metal wheel wreath ring from Dollar Tree. This measures about 14 inches in diameter. I picked out some florals and stems for this wreath. These I got at Michael's, and the flowers are from Target. I'll also be using the strip of wood that's long enough to go across the wheel. You can also use a 5-gallon paint stir stick. I'll also be using some jute twine. This one's from Dollar Tree, and some floral wire. I'm going to tie the wood on the wheel, and I make sure it goes horizontally across. I take some jute and wrap it around the wood and the wheel like so. I turn the wheel over and tie a couple knots to secure it in place. For extra support, you can also apply some hot glue on the wood and wheel. This next part is really easy. I take the flowers and position them opposite one another. I also bend the stems to match the curve of the wheel. I'm going to glue the flowers onto the wood, so I just add a little hot glue on the stems of the flowers and glue that in place. I'm leaving a little space in the center where I'm going to place a bow later. So next I take the greenery stems and attach that on the ends. This helps to create a fuller look and really makes the flowers stand out. To make sure they stay in place, I add a little bit of hot glue, and then I use some floral wire to secure everything together. I add a pop of color with some lavender stems, and I stick them into the greenery to give it a nice contrast. To make sure they don't fall out, I secure them in place with a little bit of hot glue. Then I add a little more greenery where I think it's needed, and this helps to create an even fuller and more lush look that really brings everything together. I'm going to make a bow using this wired burlap ribbon that I picked up from Walmart. First, I'm going to pull out about 5 to 6 inches of ribbon and gather it at the top, which will become the center of the bow. The bottom part of the ribbon will be the tail. Next, I form a loop by bringing the ribbon towards the back center and then pinching it all together. This will be the right side of the bow. I move the tail to the side. Then I form another loop on the opposite side, gathering it towards the center and twisting the ribbon. I repeat this process to form another loop on the opposite side and continue until I have the desired number of loops. I then form a small center loop, and then I just adjust the loops to make sure everything looks even. To secure the bow, you can use a twist tie or pipe cleaner or a zip tie, and I just run that through the small loop and secure it in the back. And that's it. Your bow is now complete and ready to use. Next, I'm going to be using this Dollar Tree wood plank, which comes in a pack of 6. First, I'm going to paint the plank white with some apple barrel acrylic paint. I brush that on all over, and then I sand it a bit with a coarse grit sandpaper. And I'm going to be using the stencil from Dollar Tree as well. I'm going to be using the part that says "It's good to be home," and I center that on the plank. I tape the sides with some painter's tape so that it won't move around, and I'm going to be using this dark brown chalk paint from Hello Hobby. It's called Cafe Noir, and I'm going to apply it with a small round foam brush. I load the brush with some paint, and I make sure to dab out any excess paint, and then I apply it lightly, pouncing it on the cutout as well as in circular strokes. I carefully remove the tape and stencil, and I let that dry a bit. Then for some dimension, I dab the edge of the plank, especially the corners, with the dark paint. I just want to add a hint of dark on the corners, so I'm going very light-handed with this. Then I glue the plank towards the right side of the wood strip. I add some burlap ribbon on top to hang, and the spring wreath is done. I love how it turned out. For the next DIY, I'll be using another one of these Dollar Tree bamboo cutting boards. I'm making a pretty little tray with gold handles, and I wanted to use a rub-on transfer again for this. They're just so pretty. I'll have that Amazon link below if you want to check it out. So here, I'm just trying to decide which part of the design I like, whether I'm going to cover the whole surface or just a small part. And I decided to go with this section right here, and so I just carefully trim it out with an X-Acto knife. I'll be using a couple of these gold metal pools from Dollar Tree. They also had black ones too, which was such a nice find. Definitely one of those things I don't always see, so I grabbed a few while I could. So before I rub on the transfer, I just want to get an idea of placement with the pools. There's a pretty little bird there, and I don't want to cover up its head. Now I thought it was a little too long, so I thought I'd cut out a line of the wording in the middle, just so I can bring the two main designs a little closer and avoid the handle going over it. And I'm just trimming some of the writings around the flowers, just so that it's not too boxy. and then I remove that white backing paper of the rub-on design and I place them down on the board with the design side facing up. I'm using the wooden stick that it came with to apply the transfer on the wood, and I start out going over the whole design, and this just helps getting it to stick initially, and so that way it doesn't move around. That was looking a bit uneven by the bird. There was this big empty spot on the top right, and so I just cut up some of that wording I had trimmed off earlier, and I stuck a few pieces to extend it. I thought that balanced it out a lot better. So I just keep rubbing over the design while slowly lifting it up. If any spots didn't transfer as I went, I would just lay it back down, rub over that area again, and then keep lifting until the whole design was fully transferred. Once the transfer is on, you can go over it with a layer of matte Mod Podge just to seal it in and keep it from peeling or scratching off later. Now, I would have loved to screw on the handles, but the screws that came with them are just too long for the cutting board. You could use shorter screws and add some adhesive bumpers underneath, but for this one, I'm just going to glue the handles on instead. I'm also going to elevate the tray with some square dowels that I trimmed down a fit, which I'll be placing underneath. I'm going to paint it just to add a little color and contrast. This is khaki chalk paint from Craftsmart. It's a very neutral color, but I could definitely see this looking great in bolder colors too. Once the paint has dried, I glue it right underneath about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. For the handle, I'll be using E6000 for a super strong hold. And I try to place that right above where I place the dowels. And this one is all done. Let me know what you think. For the next DIY, I'll be using these Dollar Tree rectangle wood slice. These are about 9 inches in length, and I'm going to be making a beautiful rustic riser. I'll be using this 1-inch square dowel. I get these at Home Depot, and I'm going to trim that so that I have 2 to just a little over 3 inches. But another option that will still work if you want to keep it simple, you can use 4 tumbling tower blocks, glue 2 pieces together, and no cutting required. I'll also be using 4 of these wooden cubes from Dollar Tree. Now, it's important that they're all equal in height or else you'll have an uneven riser. So I'm just sorting out 4 that are equal. I'm going to remove that jute hanger. The staples are on there pretty good, so I had to use a very strong staple remover to pry it out. Next, I'm going to attach the base. So I have the bottom facing up, and I'm going to add some glue on one side of that cut square dowel. And I place that close to the edge, not all the way. I do leave a little space, about 1/2 inch. I glue the other end, just making sure it's placed about the same distance from the end as the other one. I'm using Type-On multi-surface glue, but you can also use hot glue. I just like that extra repositioning time. I'm going to glue the cubes on top of the square wood close to the ends. This just gives it a little more height, and it's a nice little detail to the base. I give it about a minute or 2 to bond, and then I flip it over and I put some weight on top. And I just let that dry completely. I'm going to stain the riser, and I'll be using this water-based stain in the shade Special Walnut. I wipe the color on, and then I also wipe down the excess. Now you can paint or stain this any color, but I really love the rustic look of the stain. I also make sure to paint the base. Now you don't have to, but I also stain the bottom. And this rustic riser is done. For this project, I'll be using this 14-inch grapevine wreath. I get these at Michael's and they're quite inexpensive. I think this was just under $5. I'm going to fill it with some Dollar Tree flowers, keeping it pretty simple. I'm going with these white and purple shades, along with a few dainty flowers I pulled from a Dollar Tree bouquet. And I'm just going with these smaller ones to keep it light, natural, and airy. I love how delicate these flowers look. I want this bunch here to look more full, and I'll be using 4 of these on the wreath. I love the tiny white flowers, and I'm going to be attaching some colorful ones to the bunch. So to do that, I'm just pulling out some of the white flowers on top, and they just pop right out. And then I'm sliding in some of the colorful ones, like these pretty yellows and pinks, and I'm just pushing that down, and then I just place that white one back on top. I'm adding these gorgeous lavender stems from Dollar Tree and attaching them to the bunch. I do use quite a bit of these on each stem. Sometimes I'll even add 3 on a single stem. Now you can keep it as full or simple as you like, but either way, it gives off that natural wildflower vibe. You can even just pop them in a vase or in a white ceramic pitcher for a simple, beautiful arrangement. It's so pretty. Dollar Tree also has these beautiful rustic looking white leaf trays that I got recently, and it would also look so pretty placed on top with some candles. Okay, so back to the wreath. To attach, I'm first bending the bottom stem to match the natural curve of the wreath. And then I'm just tucking the flowers inside the grapevine, gently working them into place. Now you can always add extra reinforcements like hot glue or floral wire to make sure everything stays secure. But I'm just mostly letting the flowers naturally tuck into the wreath and just securing a few areas here and there. I only made 4 bunches for this wreath, so I spread them out as best as I could, but you can definitely add a few more for a fuller look. Now I'll be filling in any gaps and empty spaces to balance everything out. I'll also be adding a wooden sign right across, so I did make space for that. So 4 bunches was just enough for this one. For the wooden sign, I'll be using this wood plank from Dollar Tree. This one's 18 inches and I'll be trimming it to about 14 inches or so. For the wording, I have a couple options, both from Dollar Tree. There's this wooden home sign, and I love these. They come in a 2-pack. They're quite thick, and I do use them a lot. The other option was this welcome metal sign. I like the font and the length, so I decided to go with that one. I'll be painting the word white and staining the wood with antique wax. So I'm applying the antique wax with a damp cloth to keep it from going on too thick or too dark. Since the wreath is already a deep color, I want the wood to be a few shades lighter to create some contrast while adding some warmth. Before I paint the metal, I noticed that there were a couple of holes that I wanted to cover up, so I decided to just glue a couple of these metal thumbtacks, and these are also from Dollar Tree. Now I decided to snip off that nail part, but you don't have to. You can also just hammer that straight onto the wood as well. So I just glue them right over the holes and they blend in really nicely. You can leave it like this, but I'm going to paint this white. Now I was going to use acrylic paint, but I changed my mind and decided to take it outside and spray paint it instead. I thought I was completely out of the white spray paint, but thank goodness there was still a little left in the can. Next, I'm gluing it onto the wood, and I'm using Titebond multi-surface glue for a stronghold, along with a few dabs of hot glue to keep it all in place while it sets. And the final step is to attach everything in place. Once that's done, I go in and fill in any gaps or empty spaces that needs a little more fullness. I'm adding these purple flowers from Dollar Tree along with some leftover lavender to bring in more of that soft wildflower look. I love how this turned out. It has such a rustic, organic look, almost like it was gathered straight from a garden. And with that, this DIY is all finished. DIY, I'll be making an A-frame planter, and I'll be using 2 of these brown frames from Dollar Tree. It's not real wood, but it does have a wood grain texture, which I liked. First thing I'm going to do is remove the backing board and the glass, and then pull out all of the metal tabs. Next, I'm going to lightly brush over the frame with this grayish white paint. This is some extra sample paint that I had, and I'm just dry brushing the paint on all 4 sides of the frame. I'm not completely painting the frame white, I'm just lightly brushing over the surface to bring out that wood grain. After I do one, I do the other, and just by lightly going over that, you can really see the wood grain, and I like that. I also make sure to paint the sides. Now you can leave it like that, but I'm going to take it a step further, and after giving it a little time to dry, but not completely, I gently go over the frame with a damp cloth. I really love how it's looking. You can see more of the brown frame underneath and the wood grain pops out even more. So here you can see how both looks, one before wiping and one after, and I really like the after. For this next part, I'll be using some string, and I also trimmed a couple bamboo sticks to about 4.5 inches. You can also use popsicle sticks. I want the sticks to blend with the frame, so first I'm going to paint them with this dark brown color from Hello Hobby. And after that, I brushed some white paint over that very lightly, and I think that looked pretty close to the frame. Next, I'm going to be joining the frames together with the back sides together, and I'm wrapping the top of the frame with this white string. You can use ribbon or some jute string as well, but I'm not gluing it down yet. This is just going to be a temporary hold. So once I get that on, I stand the frames up and I pull apart the bottom so that it forms an A or a triangle. And I'm going to glue the sticks on the bottom, one on each corner like so. I'm using hot glue. You can definitely use a stronger glue, but honestly, I will most likely end up repurposing this project down the line anyway. Now, I'm only using 2 sticks, but you can certainly line the base with that. I think that would have looked really nice as well. But I do like it simple, just like that. Now for the top, I added a little hot glue to keep the tops together. You can also go for a stronger glue. Just lightly prop it open and add some glue in between. I want to hang this little metal pail, and there are multiple ways to do that. You can use S-hooks or grab a Dollar Tree shower curtain hook. These come in a pack, or get some decorative ones. You can also attach them with some cord or lace. I really like how this one turned out. Very simple, but so adorable. DIY, I'll be making a little tabletop stand, and I'll be using this wood shape. It looks like a little house with a triangle top, and I'll be using 2 for this project. Since I'll be painting these, I'm just sanding off that sticky residue from the label just to make sure the paint goes on nice and smooth. And I'm just using a couple warm neutral acrylic paints and thinning them down a bit with some water. So I'm just brushing that paint on and then wiping it down. And since it's thinned out, you can still see some of that wood grain underneath, which gives it a really nice stained effect. I'm using Territorial Beige and Khaki from Apple Barrel, and mixing those 2 together with a bit of water always gives me that perfect warm neutral shade, very neutral and earthy. I'm keeping it simple here, but you can totally paint or stain these whatever color you like. But let me know below, do you prefer stained wood or painted wood? I guess I like both. Once the paint is fully dry, you can use a heat tool or even a hairdryer to speed that up. I'll be adding some stenciling to add some character, and I'm using this beautiful bird and branch stencil from Walmart. I'll be gluing one of the wood shape on top of the other to form a little L shape, like a mini stand with a back, and I'll be stenciling the large bird and branch design onto the vertical piece that'll stand upright. So once I have that where I want it, I just tape it down, and I wanted the design to kind of trail out from the edge for a more natural, flowy look. I wanted a dark, almost black color for the stencil, so I'm using graphite from Craftsmart, and it gives a nice bold contrast without being too harsh. So I'm just pouncing the paint over the stencil, and I always make sure to dab off any excess paint first, and that just helps avoid bleeding and keeps the design nice and crisp. And that came out beautifully. For the horizontal piece on the bottom, I thought it would look really nice to have some of the branch coming up from below, like they're growing from the base. So I used a different part of the stencil to add that detail, just to give it a bit more balance. I could have totally left it just like that, and honestly, I think it already looks really pretty, but I felt like the top could use just a little more, so I added a few extra branches above the bird just to fill it out a bit more. You can definitely leave it as is if you like, it looks great either way. To put it together, I just added a strip of glue along the straight edge of the piece that's lying flat, and then I placed the other one right on top, standing up. Super simple. You can place some little candle holders right on top, or some small succulents. You can also use it as a decorative bookend. Definitely lots of cute ways to style it. For the next project, I'm going to be using this really cute wooden easel, which I got at Dollar Tree. I love the natural light wood finish, and I think it'll look great for what I have planned. I want to give the easel a spring update, so I'll be using this adorable rub-on transfer from the sticker and stencil section at Dollar Tree. The colors are perfect for spring, and I think they'll really make the project pop. So instead of cutting out the individual flowers, I decided to cover the entire easel with them. I simply laid the easel on top of the transfer sheet and scored the side to create an indentation where I'll need to cut. Then I trimmed out that part. After removing the white backing, I noticed that there was a bit of empty space on the bottom, so I went ahead and trimmed that out as well. Then I carefully placed the transfer on top of the easel, and I used a popsicle stick to rub the flowers onto the wood. I also held the popsicle stick on its side to cover more surface area, I carefully lift up one corner. Basically, you just want to keep rubbing over the flowers with a popsicle stick, carefully removing the plastic as you go. And if there are any areas that didn't come out completely, just go over them again until it's completely transferred. Then I take a little skewer and with a pointy side, I slowly go over the slots to remove that extra transfer. I'm going to be using this jute string, which I think I pulled out of a Dollar Tree wood sign, and some wooden beads as well as this mini clothespin. I string through the wooden beads, making sure there's enough space in the center for the little clothespin. I hot glue the ends on the back, and there you have it. A beautiful piece that's perfect for spring. DIY, I'll be using this blank rectangle MDF board from Dollar Tree. It kind of has that shiplap detail on the front. I'll also be using the 17-inch wood plank from Dollar Tree. Now I actually needed 2 for this project, but thank goodness I had a little piece left over from a past project, which was just the amount that I needed. I'm going to trim the wood plank in half, and I want 2 equal pieces without the holes. And so I just measure, mark, and then trim it. I use my miter box and saw to trim, but you can also use a utility knife and a metal ruler to score it until it breaks. For the base, I'll be using this Dollar Tree board, and I'm going to trim it to the exact length of the cut wood. And I want to make sure it's the exact size, or even a little under that, but I just don't want it to go over. I'm going to be making a rustic planter box that kind of looks like an old distressed drawer. For the wood plank, I start by adding some stain to it, and this is dark walnut from Varathane. I'm just applying one light coat over it, which covered the wood nicely. So after that, I just set it aside to dry. For the MDF board, I'm using Deco Art Satin Enamel in the shade Seaside Blue, which I thought would complement that stained wood nicely. This is such a beautiful color, and I want the paint to look a bit weathered, and so I'm just dry brushing that over the board, making sure to still let some of that wood underneath peek through. Now, I was going to leave the stain planks as is with the stain, but when I put it together to see what it would look like, it was nice, but it just kind of looked like a real drawer. And I wanted it to look like a weathered decorative drawer. So I decided to paint the stain plank Seaside Blue as well, but still letting some of that dark wood underneath peek through. So we shall see in a bit how it turns out. On the shiplap board, I'm going to add a vintage looking metal pole that I had. I drilled a couple of pilot holes so I could attach the drawer pulls. I marked where the holes needed to be so that it's centered and then drilled them. Once that was done, I attached the metal pull and screwed it into place. It's such a beautiful detail. To add the base, I'll be using 4 tumbling taro blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm applying some glue on the sides of the blocks, and then I'm applying them on the bottom corners, making sure it's flush on the bottom and side. And I'm attaching the blocks on both of the rectangle wood. The tower block will help hold up the base as well as connect the boards together. Now to assemble, I'm applying glue on the edges of the rectangle wood like so, as well as on the tower blocks, and I'm adding the glue on all 4 sides. Then I stand it up, and to keep it from falling over, I place a couple wood blocks behind them. From there, I place a base in the center, letting it rest on the tower blocks. And then I just push the sides together, and then I attach the front and the back. Now you can add more blocks in the bottom for more security. I did end up doing that, or even add some on the inside. And this one's all done. Now you can place whatever you want inside, some fresh flowers, greenery, or even a small succulent arrangement. Let me know what you would put inside. For the next DIY, I'm using this thick square wood piece. I just wanted to deepen the color a bit, so I'm mixing together that same warm neutral combo from earlier and thinning it out with a little water so it goes on like a stain. So I'm just brushing the paint on and wiping it down immediately. Acrylic paint dries really fast, so I'm just making sure to wipe it down right away. And I'm applying the paint on all sides, top and bottom. A few videos back, I made some DIYs using these beautiful rub-on transfers I found on Amazon, and I'll link that below. And I had a bunch left over, and I thought they'd look so stunning on the wood. So I really like this section with the flowers and the butterfly, and it has that beautiful vintage look. It's so pretty. So I'm just trimming that section out, and I want to make sure it fits nicely on the wood square. To apply it, I just peel off the white backing paper and place the transfer onto the wood. At this point, I can still move it around a bit to get it in the right spot before it sticks. It comes with a little wooden stick, so I start by rubbing over the whole design a few times to help it stay in place. Now, I thought I should trim out that overhang before continuing because I didn't want any of that transfer hanging off the edges or tearing as I peeled it back. So I focused on one corner, rubbing firmly and slowly lifting the top plastic sheet as I go. If any part doesn't transfer, I just lay it back down and rub it again until it sticks completely. Then I just lightly tap over the whole design with my fingers, pressing it down gently to make sure every little part is fully stuck to the wood and nothing is lifting or peeling up. There was a little piece of the transfer I trimmed off earlier, and I decided to use it to fill in a spot that looked a bit empty to help balance everything. I'm adding some wooden beads to the bottom to give it a little lift, and just hot gluing one to each of the four corners underneath. And finally, to seal and protect the transfer, I'm brushing on some Mod Podge over the top. And that's it! This one's all done, and I love how it turned out. I'm going to make a beautiful wooden round planter basket. So I'll be using this wood round from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut it right in half. So I mark the center, and with a ruler as my guide, which I tape down so it won't move, I score the wood several times with a utility knife until it cuts right through. So now I have two halves which will make the sides of our project. I'm going to stain one side of the halves. I'm using a water-based stain in the shade Special Walnut. Now this is going to be inside, but I still wanted to add a little color to it, although you can leave it as is or paint it another color. So I apply the stain and then I wipe out the excess. On the other side, I'll be using this gorgeous wallpaper with a sticky bottom from Dollar Tree. It has these lovely greenery stems with muted shades of green. So what I'll do next is cut the wallpaper to fit the two halves of the wood. I simply trace the shape onto the wallpaper. Now you will need two pieces to completely cover the wood, but while they almost fit perfectly, they're just a tad bit too long. So before I place the wood on top, I do peel that little strip on the back side to expose the sticky bottom, and then I place the wood down on a corner. And that just keeps it from moving around while I trim the wallpaper down. I do the same thing with the other half, removing that little strip and then placing the wood on top and trimming it down to size. And then I just pull out the backing paper and smooth out the wallpaper. To frame the basket, I'll be using a couple of these wooden wreath base from Dollar Tree. Instead of wood, it has that cardboard craft paper texture, so I'm going to paint over that with a similar shade. And I'm just mixing apple barrels, territorial beige, and khaki. So I brush that on all over the rings, the front, the back, and the sides. Now since I will be gluing the wood on each of them, I do try to make sure to not apply any paint on half of one side. Next, I'll be using some white string from Dollar Tree, about 5 feet in length, as well as a handful of popsicle sticks, about 15 or so, although I do end up using more. And I dry brush some white chalk paint over them. I do want it to look kind of weathered, so I just lightly go over them a couple of times, making sure there isn't too much paint on the brush. Next, I place the rings together, and I'm going to wrap the string a couple times around to hold them in place. I'm not going to use the whole string just yet. I just want it to hold the rings together at the top so that I can figure out the width of the base. This will also help me determine how short to trim the popsicle sticks. But if you prefer a wider base, you can also use longer sticks. And once I determine that, I trim a stick to fit. And I just apply some hot glue on the ends and place it on the bottom of the circle. And then I continue to mark and trim a couple more of the sticks, and I glue them in place, spacing them out a bit. I glue down about 4 sticks. And now that the rings are positioned correctly, I go back and finish wrapping the string on top. This is going to serve as the handle, so it needs to be placed at the center top, and I just keep that in mind and use it as a guide as I'm placing down the base. So I just continue gluing down the base, measuring them and trimming them down. Also, the higher up you go, the sticks will need to be cut at an angle, so I just mark that and I trim the sticks to match as much as possible. but really no big deal if it doesn't. This is going to be covered by the sides, so unless you're looking for it, you won't notice it too much. How far up you want the sticks to go is really up to you. You can have it go as high up as you want, or up until it reaches the top of the wood. I decided to have it go just a bit under the top of the half wood. Now, unless you'll be hanging this, you'll want to place a couple of dowels or blocks underneath to keep it from rocking. But first, I'm going to glue the wood to the sides. You can use wood glue or hot glue or a combo of both. So I just apply the glue along the bottom curve, and then I attach that on one side of the ring, making sure to push it down so that it's flush on the bottom. I place some clamps around to make sure it bonds tightly together, and I give it a little bit of time to bond, and then I apply glue on the other half, and then I glue that in place on the other side. Once that's dried, I glue a couple dowels on the bottom to keep it from rocking, and this DIY is done. For this project, I'm using one of these round glass plate candle holders from Dollar Tree. It has such a beautiful texture. I'm making a little wooden base for it just to add some warmth, so I grabbed a couple of these wood planks from Dollar Tree. I want the planks to form a cross shape underneath, and I want it to fit perfectly. So I go ahead and measure, mark, and trim the pieces down to the following size, and I just use a miter box and saw to cut it. Now all I have to do is glue them together, and so I'm just marking the center of the longer wood, and that's where I'm going to glue the two smaller pieces, one on each side. I'm using Tight Bond Quick and Thick glue. I love this glue. It's really thick and it also dries pretty fast. Now I decided to add a little extra detail by gluing some wood pieces onto the ends of the base. These pieces are actually from those mini pallets from Dollar Tree that I had already pulled apart. These were 2 slats, and I just trimmed each one in half to make 4 smaller pieces. Then I just glued the pieces vertically onto the ends of the wood base. It didn't take much effort at all, but that little touch of wood on the ends really took it up a notch. It just makes the whole thing look so much more finished and put together. So at first I thought I was going to stain it, and that was the plan, but once I had it all put together, I really loved how the natural wood looked. I'm just going to spray it with a sealer and leave it natural. But let me know in the comments below, would you leave it natural or paint it a different color? So I just dropped a glass candle dish right on top, and this one is all done. DIY, I'll be using this garden-themed rub-on transfer from Dollar Tree and these canvases, and these came in a pack of 3, which is the exact amount that I need. I'm going to be painting the canvases with these Waverly chalk paint. So the first one I'm going to paint in the shade Celery, and I'm using a round sponge brush to paint because it applies the paint evenly and I can avoid applying multiple layers. I make sure to get closer to the edge, but I do leave the outermost area unpainted since I plan to glue a frame on top. Once I get on that first layer, I just pounce the brush over the canvas, and somehow it makes the first layer look even more opaque. For the next canvas, I'm going to paint it in the shade Sandstone. So like the first one, I apply it close to the edge and then pounce the brush to fill in any areas that went on lightly. For the last canvas, I'm going to leave it as is. I'll be making a frame using these Dollar Tree blocks. I'll be using 10 blocks to make a frame, and I just glue the blocks together like so to make a rectangle, with 3 blocks on the longer side and 2 on the shorter. I'm using hot glue since I'm just making a small frame, and it's going to be glued onto a canvas. Now it's time to put it all together. I also added 3 more blocks which will hold up the frames. I'm going to stain the frame with this Deco Art Americana gel stain in the shade Walnut. But before I do that, I lightly sand the joints, and I find that doing this lightly fills in the areas where the gaps are very prominent. I'm not trying to completely cover it, it's not going to do that, but just lightly blend the joints. The sawdust gets in there and sort of very lightly fills in the gaps naturally. So just brush on the stain with a little brush all over the surface, including the inner and outer sides. And once I get that on all over, I wipe it down with a clean cloth to remove the excess stain. You can definitely paint or stain this any color you like, or even keep it natural, which I was also considering. I also make sure to stain those 3 single tumbling blocks. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using this rub-on transfer from Dollar Tree. I'll be using the gardening themed ones, which is perfect for this time of year. There's 3 of them, so I cut those out. For the sandstone canvas, I'll be applying this long one with the gardening tools. So to apply, I remove the white backing paper and I place the rub-on sheet on top of the canvas, centering it. And once it's where I want it to be, I use a little plastic scraper. This one's from Dollar Tree. You can also use a popsicle stick or a spoon, and I just go over the rub-on design several times. And then I slowly peel off the plastic paper, and if there's any areas where the transfer didn't adhere well to the canvas, I just place that plastic sheet back down and I just rub over that area until the whole transfers. For the celery green, I'll be applying the wildflower one, and I place that right in the center and I rub over the image, and you'll start to notice the image slowly separating from the plastic. And that's usually when I'll start peeling it off. And now for the third and final canvas, I'll be applying this Farm Fresh transfer with a border. So I apply that on top of the canvas, rub over the image, and gently peel off the plastic paper. I love that I left this white. Here are the 3 images. They all transferred beautifully, and I love the different colors. To glue the frame, I started off applying glue around the outer edge of the canvas. Now, I was a little concerned about applying too much glue and it seeping in the inner part of the frame, so I'm sure I went a little light with the hot glue, and unfortunately, it didn't hold. I could have tried again, but I thought I would just use another type of glue. So instead of hot glue, I'll be using Titebond multi-surface glue. So just apply that around the outer edge of the canvas, and then I place a wood frame right on top, making sure the image is centered. Then on the back, I just glue a single block vertically towards the bottom end, and this will help the frame stand up. And this DIY is done, and I'm loving how all of these frames turned out. For the next decor DIY, I'm using this square piece of wood from Dollar Tree. It has a raised 3D design on the front, but I'm actually going to use the back instead. I want to add some stenciling to the wood to create a light background design. I got this stencil set on Amazon and it came in a pack of 6. I'll be using one of them for this project. Now it was a bit thin and I actually thought it was going to be a little bigger, but it still worked out well. They're very pretty designs. I'll be using white chalk paint, and I decided to leave the wood as is instead of painting it. I could have added a bit more contrast by either painting the wood or using a different stencil color, but I really wanted the design to be subtle in the background. I didn't want it to stand out too much since I'm going to be placing a wreath on top. So I'm starting in the center and I tape the stencil down to keep it from shifting while I work. I lightly load my brush with paint, making sure to dab off any excess so it doesn't bleed under the stencil. Then using a soft dabbing motion, I start applying the paint over the design, gradually building it up. By the way, this video is part of a spring Easter collab hosted by Liana DIY. I am so honored to be the guest host alongside Indiana Jones. We also have Lori Bly DIY and DIY Next Door joining in, and I'll have the playlist linked below along with their channels, so be sure to check it out for more spring inspiration. Okay, once I finish the section in the middle, I shift the stencil over to the left. I line it up to connect the design, and then I just continue stenciling. And I keep going until the whole wood square is covered, and honestly, this was super easy to do. The design is super light, maybe a little hard to see with my lighting, but I'm really loving how it's coming along. On top of the wood square, I'll be placing this Dollar Tree frame, and it was just the perfect size. So I'm just turning it over and removing the backing board. And then I'm just pulling out with my pliers all the metal tabs, and those pop right out so easily. To attach to the wood, I started by applying hot glue all over the frame. I really thought that would be enough to hold it, but I was wrong. The frame isn't real wood, or maybe I was too slow and the glue dried too quickly, but either way, it popped off. So I switched to using Titebond quick and thick glue with some hot glue here and there for that instant bond. Then I clamped it all around and gave it some time to dry, and yeah, that worked much better. I'll be adding a cute little wreath on top using this gold metal hoop. I'm decorating it with some beautiful flowers I pulled from a Dollar Tree bouquet, keeping it soft and simple. So I'm going to be gluing a couple of these leaves together, making sure they're going in opposite directions. I'm just adding the glue to the stems, making sure there's a little space in the center, and I'll make 2 of these. Before I start gluing the flowers onto the hoop, I noticed it was looking a little brassy and faded in some areas, so I'm just going to use some rub and buff wax to give it a bit of a refresh. I'm using a piece of cloth to apply that on the hoop, so now that's looking much better. I thought I'd add these little pink fuchsia colored flowers behind the leaves. They're so pretty and dainty, and I'm just going to add them to one of the glued leaves. And then I'm wrapping some jute string around the center, and this will make it easier to glue some flowers in the middle, and it also cleans it up. And from there, I'm wrapping it around the metal hoop to attach it and hold it in place. I'm also securing it in with more hot glue. Next, I'm going to add a couple of flowers in the center. I love these flowers. They're very simple, but they really complete the look, and they just tie everything together. For the next set of glued leaves, I'm just gluing them directly onto the hoop, then wrapping some jute string around the center. This one isn't going to be as full as the one in the bottom, but it's going to complement it and help balance out the wreath. I'm just placing one flower in the center, and then I'm adding some baby's breath around the flower to add more texture and fill in the empty spaces. I'll be using some wooden letters from Michael's and Dollar Tree to spell out Hello Spring, and I'll be placing them on top of a couple giant popsicle sticks, and I just trimmed off the ends a bit so it's flat and not curved. I'll be using the word hello from this wooden word pack from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be giving the words a coat of white paint. For the craft sticks, I'm staining them with some Waverly antique wax, and I'm applying it with a damp cloth so that it goes on smoothly and it gives it a nice even finish. To glue together, I'm just adding some glue on this small craft stick, and I'm placing that right in the center like so. And I did also add a couple more going vertically on the ends. Next, I'm gluing the letters down using some wood glue to attach them, and I'm just spacing it out before gluing. I really like how the words have different fonts. It just makes it look even better. I decided to add some jute string on the areas of the hoop where I'm going to add glue, so I'm just wrapping about 1 inch in length on both sides. And then I apply some hot glue on top of the string, and then I placed a wooden sign right on top of that. Then I add some more glue on the back of the wrapped jute string, and then I glue that onto the wood board. I added a few more flowers in some areas. I thought it needed a few more. You can add a string hanger on the back or just lean it against the wall. So Dollar Tree has these really adorable 6-inch round woven baskets. I think they're so beautiful on their own, and we're going to give them all a quick little upgrade to make them even more charming. So this first one is going to be really quick to do. Just grab a couple of these baskets. I'll be using this one with a black detail on top, and I'll be turning these into candle holders. And I'm going to be placing a couple of these battery operated pillar candles inside. So quick and simple, and it just adds a really nice, cozy, warm touch to any space. Now, if you want to add a fresh, natural touch to the candle holders and give it a brighter look, you can add some flowers or greenery. I'll be using the baby's breath on this bouquet. This one's from Walmart, and I really like the realistic look of these. And I just plucked the baby's breath from the bouquet, as you can see here. So I'm just going to fill in the basket, placing the baby's breath around the base of the candle. So I'm just filling in that area. Now, if you want it to look more full, you can use a couple of these bouquets or keep it light, but I really love the fresh, simple look of the baby's breath. Now, if you want to make it even more full, you can add some greenery here and there to create more depth. Mixing in different types of greenery adds a variety of textures, making the arrangement look more natural and vibrant. And finally, for some color, you can add in some flowers, and I just tucked those inside the baby's breath and greenery. I pulled all these flowers from different Dollar Tree flower bouquets, and I'm just playing around with them, mixing and matching different colors. I think they all look so pretty together, and the flowers really give it a fresh, lively feel that brightens up the whole piece. For this project, I'm going to be using a couple frames from Dollar Tree, as well as this beautiful floral fabric from Dollar Tree as well. I'm going to start with a larger frame. I turn it over and I remove the backing board and the little cardboard inside. I'm going to cut the fabric to fit inside the frame, and so I used that cardboard as a template. So I cut out the fabric. Unfortunately, I did not pay attention to the direction of the pattern and I didn't position it correctly. I wanted the frame to stand vertically, not horizontally, so I had to recut it. There's a white foam around the frame, which I removed. I also won't be using the glass. Now that backing board is quite flimsy, so I glued that additional cardboard to strengthen it up. You can also replace that with a more sturdy foam board as well. And then I hot glue the fabric onto the board, making sure it's lying completely flat. I turn it over and I just trim out that excess fabric. I pop the fabric in the frame and close it up. Because I'm not putting the glass back in, there's going to be a little extra room in the back, so you can leave it, which I did, or you can fill it up with another layer of cardboard or secure it with a little bit of hot glue. But wow, look at that. I really love the fabric against the gold. For the smaller white frame, I'm going to be using this home sign left over from my last video, this Dollar Tree plank which I cut in half for a prior project, and some scrap burlap. I placed the backing board on top of the burlap and then I cut that amount out. I'm going to glue the burlap on the board. There's some black metal popping out of it, so I just paint over that with some matching acrylic paint to conceal it. I place the burlap on top and hot glue it in place. To get the home sign to fit on the plank, I cut it in half, and then I just touch up the areas needed with some black acrylic paint. I paint the plank with some leftover sample paint that I have. This is Sea Frost from Glidden. It's a beautiful light tone gray. I trim out the excess burlap, and then I place that back in the frame and I secure the tabs. And then I glue the home sign in place, placing the letters vertically with the HO on top and the ME on the bottom. I add some hot glue to the back of the plank and place that right in the center of the burlap frame. Alright, and that is it for this DIY. I'm really happy with how these frames turned out. They look so beautiful together and they really complement each other well. DIY is a quick one. I grabbed one of Dollar Tree's wooden wreath beads and I got the stained one. I also got some greenery and flowers from Dollar Tree as well. I got these a while back. The colors are so pretty and you have two different shades of pink, which is nice. So first, I start by bending the stems of the greenery to match the round shape of the wreath. I'm gently shaping and curving them so they blend in naturally. You can also trim them down a bit if you want, but I'm keeping them intact since it makes attaching them to the wreath much easier. To attach, I cut a piece of floral wire and I wind it around the stem of the greenery to secure it in place. For added stability, you can also wrap some wire higher up on the stem. And then I place another greenery stem, securing it in place. This time going the opposite direction and also making sure I have some space in between for some flowers. Now for the flowers, I'll be gluing 3 of them in the center with a darker pink in the middle and the lighter pink ones on each side. That's all I'm doing for this one, but you can definitely add more flowers if you'd like, or even a small wooden sign across the middle. But personally, I love the simplicity of this one. I attached some ribbon to hang the wreath, and this one's done. Kirkland's sells these beautiful glass bottle basin crate, and I wanted to create my version of it. So for this DIY, I'm going to be using 2 of these white wood, which I trimmed to 14 inches. They came in a pack of 10 from my local Home Depot, but if you can't find these, no worries. You can also use 2 5-gallon paint stir sticks. I'm also going to be using 2 bamboo sticks, which I got on Amazon and they came in a big pack, and 20 tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm going to glue the 2 14-inch wood together side by side, and I'm going to be using wood glue. This one's from Dollar Tree. It's a very strong and quick drying glue, definitely one of my favorite wood glues. I'm going to clamp it with some electrical tape, and while I give that some time to dry, I work on the blocks. I'm going to glue 4 blocks together like so, and I make 2 sets. Then I glue 2 blocks side by side and I make 4 sets. And finally, I glue 2 blocks together end to end and I make 2 sets of that. Next, I glue the set of 2 that's glued side by side on the edge of the 4 blocks, and I glue 1 on each end so that it looks like a U, and I make 2 sets of that. I apply some glue on the U's as well as on the ends of the 14-inch glued wood. I space out the U's to the length of the 14-inch wood, and I drop the wood on top, and it should fit perfectly. Then I apply some glue on the tops of the blocks, the 2 on the outer ends, and then I place the set of 2 blocks on top like so, and I do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm going to glue the bamboo sticks on top of the inner tumbling blocks, so I trim them to fit and then I glue them down. Now I'm going to be adding some color to this, and I'm going to be making my own stain, so I do sand the areas where the glue may have seeped out, otherwise it's not going to hold the color well. But you can also pre-paint the wood before gluing. To make a stain, I'm going to be mixing this brown acrylic paint from Dollar Tree with some black and gray paint. The brown comes out a little orange, so the black and gray neutralizes that orange and gives the brown a darker and deeper color. I'm going to add some water to the mix so that the paint goes on more like a stain. So I brush the paint on and then I immediately wipe it down to expose the beautiful wood patterns underneath. And because this is acrylic paint, this will dry pretty fast. I place some Dollar Tree vases on top and this DIY is done. For the next project, I'll be using 4 of these mini square wood pallets from Dollar Tree. I'm going to transform them into some beautiful coasters. I found these gorgeous napkins at Michael's and I thought they were just perfect for spring. The soft pastel colors are exactly what I was looking for, and I think they'll look amazing on the wood. I'm going to Mod Podge the napkins onto the pallets using the iron-on method, which makes it super easy to get a smooth finish. So for the first palette, I'm brushing Mod Podge over the entire top, and I'm making sure to apply a nice even layer so the napkin sticks well. I thought it'd be fun to mix things up and give each one a unique design. So on another, I'm just applying Mod Podge on the 3 center slats, and another on the 2 outer ones. And on the last one, I just do every other. So that way each coaster has its own look, but they still feel like a set. And then I just let that Mod Podge dry completely. Before I iron on the napkin, I make sure to separate the layers since it's double ply. You only want to use a top printed layer for this, and so I just carefully peel them apart and then I cut the napkins to fit over the pallets. Now I'm using my mini heat press on a low setting, but you can also use a regular iron for this step too. To protect the napkin from direct heat, I place a sheet of parchment paper over it. And then I just gently press down and slowly move the heat press across the surface. The heat reactivates the dried Mod Podge underneath, causing the napkin to adhere perfectly to the wood. I love using the iron-on method because it gives such a smooth, clean, bubble-free finish without the risk of wrinkling or tearing the napkin, and it really helps the design look like it's part of the wood itself. Next, I'm sanding off the overhang to clean up the edges and make everything look nice. I'm using my mini sander for the outer edges, and for those hard to reach spots between the wood slats, I switched to a smaller sanding sheet. I carefully cut between these slats first so I can easily slide the sanding sheet right through. Wow, as I'm sanding, I'm really loving how it's turning out. I'm so glad I decided to mix things up where I place the napkins. It's actually quite satisfying seeing the different designs come together, and you know what, it's looking even better than I imagined. I wanted to have a little storage for the coasters, so I'm using this small wooden crate from Dollar Tree, and it's just the right size. I want to match it with the coasters, so I'm going to do the same thing, applying Mod Podge to the crate, and once that dries, ironing on the napkin to reactivate the Mod Podge, which will adhere the napkin in place. And I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay, so next is sanding, and I'm cutting slits between the gaps with a craft knife so I can get a sanding sheet right in between to remove the overhang. The final step is sealing the napkin in place. So I did apply a layer of Mod Podge right on top, and now that it's dry, I'm ironing over it to help flatten any bubbles that may have formed. And you really want to make sure to have a piece of parchment paper in between to protect the napkin, and you also don't want any of that glue getting on your iron. Now this part is optional, but since these are coasters and will be exposed to different temperatures, I decided to add an extra layer of protection by spraying on some spar urethane from Minwax. Especially if you're making these as gifts, that extra layer will just help protect the design and the wood from moisture and heat, so they'll stay looking nice longer. Alright, next I'm adding some cork to the bottom. I get these cork sheets at Dollar Tree and they're super convenient because they have a sticky back, which makes the whole process so much easier. I'm cutting a few strips from each coaster using a craft knife, sticking 2 strips on the outer edges of the bottom of each coaster, and this will help protect your surfaces from scratches and make sure the coasters don't slip around. Alright, so I thought I was done, but I wanted to take it a step further and make it look even nicer. The crate is a little longer than the pallets, so I wanted to close those gaps up a bit. I decided to trim some bamboo sticks to fit and cover up the gap. I glued them in place, and I really love how it turned out. It just gave everything a more finished, polished look and made the whole thing come together even better. Dollar Tree has a wide variation of frames, so I grabbed a variety of frames for today's video. So for the first project, I will be using the simple white 8 by 10 inch frame, about 9 tumbling tower blocks, and this wood plank, all from Dollar Tree. I'm going to be trimming the plank to the width of the frame, so I lay that on top to measure and I trim that to about 9 5/8 of an inch. Next, I'm going to turn the frame over and I carefully remove the backing board and the glass. With some pliers, I pull out all of the metal tabs. I'll be gluing the blocks on the wood towards the bottom edge. So I add some hot glue on the narrow side of a block and I place that down horizontally on the bottom corner of the plank like so. And then I add some glue on another block and I place that vertically right on top, also gluing them to each other. And then place another block right on top of that like so. And then I glue some more blocks just like that on the opposite side. Next, I'm just gluing more blocks on the bottom edge, gluing them on the wood and to each other. It's not going to be a perfect fit, there will be some gaps, at least for one block. But everything else, I make sure to connect them to each other. I'll be painting the wood and the blocks white. I'm just using Apple Barrel's white acrylic paint. And I just brush that on all over the front and the sides. But you know, you can paint this any color or even stain it. It would make a nice contrast to the white frame. Next, I'll be using some giant craft sticks. These are about 10 inches and I get these at Walmart. I'm going to trim them so that they fit nicely in the back of the frame where the backing board and glass usually sit. So I mark that and I just use scissors to trim them down. I want the wood to be a nice contrast. I'm going to stain them with this gel stain in the shade Walnut from Deco Art. So I brush that on and then I wipe it down. I'll be using hot glue to glue the craft sticks on the frame, but for the strongest hold, because of the material of the frame, I definitely recommend using a stronger glue like E6000, otherwise it can pop off. So I'm just placing them on the back of the frame and positioning them, spacing them out evenly. And once I have them where I want them to be, I glue them down. Now I ended up using 6 craft sticks, but if you want a tighter fit, you can add 1 more. So here's how the frame is looking. I really love the contrast. And finally, I apply some glue on the blocks and then I place that on the front of the frame, making sure it's flush on the bottom. I'm going to have this stand, but you can also attach some jute cord in the back if you want it to hang. Now you can add some stenciling on the front, add some wording, but I wanted to keep this one simple, just like that. Add some flowers and greenery and the simple DIY is done. While I was at Dollar Tree, these wooden farmhouse buffalo check houses caught my attention. They are so adorable and I wanted to craft with them, so I grabbed a couple. They each have a shape in the center, a rectangle or a heart. I'm going to make a wooden house shaped toolbox planter. Now, if I knew what I was going to make when I bought them, I probably would have picked the same shape, but I didn't, and that's okay. I'll also be using 2 of these 6-inch wood planks from Dollar Tree. Several 1-gallon paint stir sticks. These are scraps, and you just need enough to cover the roof. Now this part is optional. I wanted to add some wood over the roof, so I placed 2 of them on top to measure and mark, and instead of cutting the ends at a 45-degree angle, I'm just going to butt the wood together, where I glue one end to the side of the other to form an L. Once the wood has been trimmed, I'm going to paint them. Since the houses are black and white, I'm going to paint them black. That way, whatever I display inside, it will complement the house and vice versa. Now here, I'm trying it out to see what it looked like on top of the house, and you know, I didn't really like it. I thought it just looked a little too dark. So I tried sanding it a little, and I still didn't like it and decided to go with a more natural woodsy color using Waverly Antique Wax. Next, I'm going to paint the roof trim black, and this will complement the wooden roof beautifully. I'm just using a small brush to apply the paint, and to make sure I don't get it on the house, I'm using a little popsicle stick to protect the fabric underneath close to that edge. I apply some glue on top and position the paint stick in place. And then I do the same thing with the other house. You just want to make sure that they're positioned in the right place before gluing down. Unless you cut them both at a 45-degree angle, one will be longer than the other. For the handle, I'm going to be using this 3/16 of an inch dowel and a couple of these wood slices from Dollar Tree. So I drill a hole right in the center of the wood. I used a pilot drill bit to match the diameter of the dowel. Now you can paint the back if you like. I can see that there's some leftover residue from the sticker, but I'm going to leave it as is for now, and I'll probably clean it up later. I'm going to glue down a wood circle right on top. I'm just positioning it towards the center. So I'm just setting it up to get the right distance so that I can measure and cut the dowel to the right size. And I'm just using my angle miter shear to trim that down. Now before I glue the other circle, I'm setting it up again just so I know where to glue the circle so that the dowel is straight. But the houses kept falling over. I know I should have just put some blocks behind it to hold it up. But then I realized I'm using wood glue and I do have a little time to make any adjustments. So I just went ahead and glued everything together. I'm making sure that the distance is just right for the plank. I want to make sure it fits perfectly end to end, and then I just add some glue on the ends of the dowels. I add a strip of glue on the ends of the wood, and I adhere that on the sides of the houses. And then I do the other side. Then I use a carpenter square just to make sure the corners are at a 90-degree angle. For the base, I'm going to be using this 1/4-inch square dowel and some of these giant popsicle sticks. It's going to go inside the wood planks, so I'm measuring it and I'm going to trim so that I have 2 to that size. You can also measure and trim them to go on the shorter side to go against the house instead of the planks. I apply a strip of glue on one side of the square dowel, and then I place that inside against the wood plank. I take out 4 of these giant popsicle sticks because that's what can fit, and then I mark them to fit inside, and then I trim them down. Once trimmed, I place them inside, space them out evenly, and then I glue them down. Now you can use any size popsicle sticks for the base. If you want a tighter fit, you can push them together and just trim another stick to fit. I wanted to put something on the shapes that are on the front of the houses, and so I'm just going to use these Dollar Tree rub-on transfers and place them on these scrap paint sticks that already have antique wax on them. Now I'm not really sure if you can use chalk on the shapes. It looks like you can, so that's definitely another option. But I'm going to go ahead and rub on these words. On the rectangle, I'm going to place the word family on it. So I place the word on top of the paint stick, and I use a popsicle stick to rub it on. Then I glue that right in the center of the rectangle. For the heart, it is a little bit smaller in space, so I'm going to put the word love on a smaller piece of paint stick. Decided to hot glue that right above the heart. And we're done! This charming wooden house planter turned out so adorable. I really love the way it turned out. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and would love to see more videos like this in the future, will you take a moment to give it a thumbs up? These videos do take time to make, so I really do appreciate your support. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye!